Hello my dear friends, today we are putting two versions head to head, Pro versus Ultra. It seems it's easy to guess which one should come out on top, but are the differences really that obvious? Let's find out. The Oppo Find X8 Ultra has been with me for almost half a year now. We have really gotten to know each other well. Meanwhile, the Vivo X300 Pro is just entering the market, but it's hiding a few surprises. Before we dive into the comparison, don't forget to subscribe. It's a huge motivation for me to keep creating. Thanks to your support, I can make videos like this one. Believe me, each of them takes not only editing time, but also hours of testing, planning and analysis. But alright, let's get started. Both devices have a fairly similar design. After the Vivo X200 Ultra, I expected the X300 Pro to stand out more, but I have to say I was pleasantly surprised. In my opinion, the smaller camera bump looks much better. You could even say that its size is closer to that of the Oppo Find X8 Ultra. Build quality on both smartphones is excellent, but despite their many similarities, it's the Vivo that caught my eye. To be precise, its color. The shade somewhere between brown and beige, paired with darker frames, looks elegant and modern. It's also worth mentioning that both devices offer water resistance with IP69 ratings. When it comes to displays, both smartphones have LTPO panels with a refresh rate up to 120 Hz. The Vivo comes with 6.78-inch screen, while the Oppo is slightly larger at 6.82 inches. Oppo also offers a slightly higher resolution. Both displays are now completely flat, which I consider a big advantage. Not only for daily comfort, but also because it allows for using tempered glass instead of just a film protector. Both panels are 10-bit, providing better color depth and smoother gradients. The PWM dimming frequency is identical on both models, 2160 Hz. I use the vivid mode on both devices, which delivers intense, well-balanced colors, although Oppo's display seems to reproduce color closer to reality. According to the producers, peak brightness on the Vivo reaches up to 4500 nits, while on Oppo it's 2500 nits. These are of course HDR values. In real-world use, especially indoors, the difference isn't very noticeable. Even in full sunlight, the differences are not huge, but this may also be thanks to the anti-reflective glass I have applied on the Oppo, which improves visibility and overall clarity. When I tested the Oppo Find X8 Ultra against the Vivo X200 Ultra earlier, I didn't have this type of protective glass installed, so that could also affect my perception. Automatic brightness adjustments works quite well on both phones, but I have a small number of little concerns. On the Oppo, the screen sometimes dims itself too much under strong sunlight, requiring a manual correction. On Vivo, on the other hand, the brightness response could be a bit faster when the lighting conditions change. Both smartphones offer the new always-on display that adapts to your set wallpaper, but on Oppo this feature requires an update to ColorOS 16. When it comes to biometrics, both smartphones perform excellently. In addition to standard 2D face unlock, they have ultrasonic fingerprint sensors that are fast, highly accurate and are at the correct height. As I mentioned, I have a glass on my Oppo screen, so please take it into account. In everyday use, it's hard to find anything to complain about with either of these phones. In my case, both come in versions with 16GB of RAM and 512GB of storage. The main difference lies in their processors. The Oppo is powered by Snapdragon 8 Elite, while the Vivo has MediaTek Dimensity 9500. In practice, both are really fast. Apps open instantly, and overall day-to-day performance is perfectly smooth. The most noticeable difference between them concerns the software. The Vivo runs Origin OS, while the Oppo uses Color OS, and Vivo already ships with Android 16. Which interface you prefer really comes down to personal taste. Personally, I lean towards Color OS. Both systems offer a lot of customization options, but there is an important difference. On Oppo, you can't download new themes from the store unless you are in a region where Oppo is officially sold. Vivo, on the other hand, doesn't have this limitation. Although some themes are paid, it's still a big advantage for Origin OS. Since both phones are a Chinese version, in my case of course, there are a few expected limitations, such as lack of eSIM support or some AI features related to the Chinese assistant. I've covered these topics in more detail in my previous videos about Color OS and Origin OS, so if you are interested, I recommend checking those out. When it comes to haptics, Oppo once again nails it. The vibration feedback is precise. The new haptics motor in Vivo X300 Pro feels much more responsive, and the vibrations while typing or navigating the interface are noticeably more refined compared to my Vivo X100 Ultra. But that said, Oppo still holds a slight edge in my opinion. Its response seems more precise, but the difference between these two models has definitely decreased. And now let's talk about temperature and heat management. Right from the initial setup of Vivo X300 Pro, I noticed that it can get quite warm, and that immediately caught my attention. In real-world use, both phones handle thermals well. At around 25-27 degrees, light heating can occur during longer camera session, with the Vivo tending to run slightly warmer than the Oppo. For example, during 4K 60fps recording after a few photo shots, both phones lasted about 15 minutes without issue. By the end, the Vivo reached around 43 degrees, while the Oppo stayed closer to 38 degrees. It's not a huge difference, but it's noticeable, especially during extended photography or video session in warmer conditions. Both phones also come with extra features like Air Blaster for controlling home devices and an additional action button that can be used to set a specific function. However, they work slightly differently. On the Oppo, you can't set an action to double-click. On the Vivo, you can set functions for both a double-click and a long press. Oppo also includes a dedicated camera button, but personally I don't use it often because it's not very convenient for me. Regarding support, available information suggests that Vivo should offer 5 years of system updates, which was confirmed by the representative of Vivo Poland on Facebook. For Oppo, it's hard to find official information, but it should be 5 years of Android updates, similar to the X8 Pro model. In terms of signal strength, both phones performs really well. I have special spot where most phones like iPhones or Pixel struggle a lot with reception. Yet both the Oppo and Vivo had no range problems, sending messages on Telegram and streaming music from Tidal without any issues. As for call quality, both models offer a very similar level. I tested them both in dense urban areas, indoors or closer to a tourist trail. Under all conditions, calls were clear and crisp. At times the Oppo sounded slightly clearer, but the difference is very slight. Let's move on to the speakers. Both get loud, but in my opinion the Oppo offers better sound quality. The audio feels wider and more spacious. On Vivo, the sound seems a bit more compressed. The mid-range can still be a bit too strong at times. With the Oppo Find X8 Ultra, we also get orality sound. Vivo, on the other hand, comes with the audio super resolution feature. When it comes to Bluetooth codecs, Oppo has the edge. It supports LDAC, LHDC, aptX, aptX HD, and aptX adaptive. Vivo supports LDAC, LHDC, aptX, and aptX HD. But there is no aptX adaptive, which I verify by connecting my Denon Per Pro. And now let's move on to the camera. To keep things short, the specifications on each lens are shown on the chart in front of you. Let's start with the main camera. This is one of those comparisons where, even though the focal lengths are quite similar, Vivo 24, Oppo 23mm, in practice the differences depend on many factors that are worth breaking down. In the Vivo, you will find several color profiles, from vivid, texture, natural, classic negative, and, for example, clear blue. All the photos in this review were taken in the natural mode. Additionally, there is a raw lighting feature, which affects not only the colors, but also the overall character of the image. I will come back to that in a moment. Oppo, on the other hand, offers a Master Mode Auto and Master Mode Pro that serves a similar purpose, and I will also return to that later. The main camera on the Vivo performs excellently in terms of detail, just like the Oppo. Both smartphones handle detail really well. The differences lie in the image processing and the overall character of the photos. On default settings, Vivo's photos can sometimes appear slightly more sharpened, and the HDR is fairly aggressive. It can brighten shadows too much, especially in low light conditions. In Oppo, very bright scenes can produce photos that are too bright or slightly overexposed. In such cases, it's worth slightly adjusting the exposure to achieve a more natural results. Fortunately, both phones offer additional modes and settings. In Vivo, you can use effect adjustment to manually tweak parameters such as brightness or sharpening, but this requires more time. An alternative is raw lighting feature, which made a big impression on me. It makes photos less processed and more natural, something that is also noticeable in the speed of the taking photos. Importantly, raw lighting doesn't limit zoom, unlike Oppo's Master Mode. In Oppo, in Master Mode, we can only zoom in up to 10x. I've come across some opinions suggesting that raw lighting is simply a new name for the HDR switch, and honestly, that could be true, as their behavior is quite similar. But my initial side-by-side testing with the Vivo X100 Ultra doesn't fully confirm that. Of course, the differences might also come down to the distinct camera setups in the Vivo X100 Ultra and Vivo X300 Pro. But since this is a comparison with the X8 Ultra rather than a full X300 Pro review, I will return to this topic in one of my next videos. Personally, I mostly use both modes, raw lighting and master mode, during the day. That's when the photos turn out best. In challenging lighting conditions like sunrise, sunset or nighttime, automatic mode tends to perform better. Both Vivo's raw lighting and Oppo's master mode can sometimes overexpose parts of the frame, since they don't apply additional processing. To get more natural results in low or tricky lights, you can try Oppo's master mode in manual settings or switch to Vivo's humanistic street snap camera. The ultra-wide angle on both phones is very similar on paper, and in practice, there aren't any major differences. When zooming in, the level of detail is comparable, producing really decent results. But of course, these aren't the best ultra-wide lenses on the market. The wide lens on the Vivo X200 Ultra performs, of course, better, especially in low light conditions. In terms of color reproduction, I personally prefer the results from the Vivo. As for telephoto lens, the Vivo X300 Pro has a single 3.5 telephoto lens featuring Samsung's new HPB sensor. The Oppo Find X8 Ultra, on the other hand, has two telephoto lenses, which have been upgraded compared to previous generations. The Vivo telephoto focuses from around 16 cm. Oppo 3X lens can focus from just 10 cm, allowing it to be used for macro or close-up shots. The 6X telephoto on the Oppo focuses from over 90 cm, so it's important to note that shots taken closer than that are crops from the 3X lens unless you turn off the automatic switching between lenses. In good lighting conditions, both telephoto lenses on the Oppo performs very well and can compete with the HPB sensor used in Vivo. Interestingly, photos taken with the Vivo at 6x zoom, what will be a crop, don't lose much in quality compared to the Oppo's 6x optical zoom. Images from the Vivo appear to have slightly more detail, although they are also a bit more heavily sharpened. Of course, this is with raw lighting turned off. When it comes to zoom, both phones perform very well up to around 10x, making it hard to declare a clear winner. Much depends on the level of super telephoto enhancement feature. In Vivo's extreme mode, because we have three levels of normal and extreme, in this Vivo's extreme mode, AI algorithms noticeably boost details, especially beyond 30x. Vivo has a greater tendency to so-called image painting. Oppo also has AI zoom, but it only kicks in from 60x, and it's not as aggressive as Vivo's. Of course, you can disable AI zoom on Oppo above 60x, but I would still recommend keeping it on. Regarding macro mode, both smartphones use the telephoto lens. In Oppo, the 3x telephoto lens is used, and the maximum zoom in macro mode is 30x, while in the Vivo is 20x. In good lighting conditions, both phones can achieve very good results, but in low light, Vivo has the advantage. It's also worth noting that autofocus on Vivo now works much better, making macro photography really enjoyable. But this aspect applies to both Vivo and Oppo. Portrait photos from both smartphones look really good. On the Oppo you can shoot at 1x, 2x, 3x and 6x. And you can also fine-tune the distance using a slider. On the Vivo, the options are 24, 35, 50, 85 and 135 mm. Both phones handle subject background separation very well, but Vivo has reached near perfection in this area this year. The only drawback for me on Vivo is the stronger beauty effect, which remains visible even after being disabled in the settings. Portrait photos from Oppo look more natural in this regard. The front cameras on both smartphones deliver excellent quality. Vivo introduces a brand new selfie camera, and you can really see the difference. Both phones capture detailed shots, but Vivo's front camera performs really well in portrait mode. The hair separation isn't perfect, but it's easily one of the best I've seen so far. Night photos on both smartphones are very good. Both Vivo and Oppo offer automatic night mode, which works excellently and activates when needed. The level of detail is very good in both cases. There are some noticeable differences in white balance. Vivo more often maintains a warmer, more natural tone. A big plus for Vivo is how well it handles point light sources. Flares are much less noticeable, making night shots look simply better. For action or moving shots, both smartphones offer dedicated action modes. In good lighting conditions, the results are excellent. Motion blur is very rare, whether using the main lens or the telephoto lens. In natural, lower light, both devices still perform very well. Differences start to become noticeable under artificial lighting, where motion blur is more likely. If I had to pick a winner in this category, I would give a slight edge to Vivo, although it must be said that Oppo also performs at very high level. When it comes to video recording, Vivo offers the ability to record in 8K at 30 FPS. Oppo doesn't support 8K, but both smartphones allow recording in 4K 120 FPS. It's also worth mentioning Dolby Vision. Both devices support this feature on the front and main cameras. One downside of Oppo is the inability to switch between the main and front cameras while recording, even though the phone has been on the market for almost 6 months. In Vivo, you can switch between the front and main cameras, but only when recording in 4K 30 FPS. This option is unavailable at 4K 60 FPS. Both smartphones offer a Pro Video mode as well as a log profile. In terms of image quality, Vivo's footage is sharper, slightly more processed, looking especially on main lens, what you will mainly notice on a large screen. Oppo's offers slightly more natural, softer image. Regarding stabilization, Vivo has the edge, producing smoother footage, especially in low light conditions. Now there is a little wind today, wide angle, we back to 1x, okay, and now telephoto lens on Vivo and first telephoto on Oppo. Second telephoto on Oppo. Maximum zoom is 20x on Vivo and 30x on Oppo, but we go to 20x. Now you can see the difference. Back to 1x and running. .4K 60 FPS front-facing camera. On both we can take photo, we can pause. On Oppo we can't switch to the main camera. On Vivo we can only in 4K 30 FPS. Now we can change the view a little on both. And now maybe towards sun and running. 4K 60 FPS on both phones, front-facing camera. The sun has already set, so you can see, or you can't see, because it's not perfect on both phones. The view behind me is not as I expected. But before start recording, we can adjust the exposure on Oppo and brightness on Vivo, and when we do that, the image will be look different. We can check this. Now I changed the setting for Oppo and for Vivo. Vivo in terms of brightness and exposure. So if I'm turning, you can see, I think you can see the difference, but of course the face is a little darker, so there is one difference. And now stabilization during running. 4K 60 FPS front-facing camera at night, so the conditions are really difficult. On Oppo you can see the field light, you can see it on my glasses here, but in terms of Vivo I don't see this kind of option. So now you can see how it looks like when I change direction a little. So there is video, front-facing camera at night. Now let's move on to the battery. The Vivo comes with the 6510 mAh battery, while the Oppo packs a 6100 mAh one. Although on paper the difference seems significant in favor of Vivo, in daily use there is no major advantage. The performance is quite comparable. I'm not only talking about screen on time, it's still a bit early for Vivo, but about general day-to-day usage. I've been using both phones with 2 SIM cards in a mixed cycle, sometime on Wi-Fi, sometime on mobile data. In such conditions, both devices easily last a full day. I'm referring here to the Chinese version of the Vivo, as the global model has a much smaller battery. After a few days of use, I noticed that when taking photos or recording videos, battery drain was very similar on both models. Both phones come from the Chinese distribution, so a charger is included in the box. Vivo supports 90-watt wired and 40-watt wireless charging, while Oppo offers 100-watt wired and 50-watt wireless. To sum up, both of these smartphones are great devices. Even though one carries the Pro label, it doesn't differ dramatically from its counterpart in the Ultra series. Of course, there are differences in screen resolution, speakers and, for example, Codecs support, but when it comes to overall performance, everyday experience and especially the camera, the difference is minimal. In some situations, the Vivo camera even feels more consistent. I can't clearly say which one has the better camera, because in many aspects it really comes down to personal preference. What I do know is that the Vivo X300 Pro left a strong impression on me with its camera performance, that deciding which phone to keep is still an open question. And once the Oppo Find X8 Pro arrives, well, things might get even more confusing. Thanks for watching. I hope this video helped you decide which one fits your needs better. So take care and see you soon.